Welcome back, Caustic Man. I've got another cool one for you to look at today. This is the Goodspeed Scout. This is another iteration of the Go Anywhere, Do Anything watch, one of several that's coming out from micro brands recently. So nice to see these smaller brands branching out from the ever popular dive watch format. Let's get into it, but you know how it's going to go. No wrist check, no BS, just in depth with this watch in 10 minutes or less. So this is the Goodspeed Scout. This is going to come to you at under $400, it looks like, at this point. This is not yet launched on Kickstarter. It's going to be launching, I believe, in February of 2021. So still time to jump in on this one. It's coming in with a Miyota 9039 movement, workhorse movement. You can see it's ticking away already, that nice sweep of the seconds hand at 28,800 vibrations per hour. You guys are pretty familiar with this, so I'm not going to spend too much time on the movement. I'm not certain about the warranty that this is going to come with at this point. That information is not out yet. I think you can probably assume at least 1 year warranty on this. On the Goodspeed website, the case diameter is listed at 38.5. On my calipers, I measured it closer to 38.8, so it's a relatively large watch for a field watch, go anywhere, do anything watch, / dress watch. I think it fits closer to the 39 millimeter range. Case thickness is coming in at just over 10 millimeters at 10.1, lug to lug of 44.5, and lug width right on 20 millimeters. This is a sapphire crystal with a good amount of anti-reflective coating. You can see it does a pretty good job of mitigating the glare from the studio lights. Not sure of the Loom on this. The information is still a little scanty for this model, but we'll take a look at a Loom shot, see how it performs. A very capable 200 meters of water resistance on this watch, and that's partially owing to the screw down crown that is signed. You can see with the Goodspeed logo. And since it is a screw down crown, let's check the action on it. So unscrewing the screw down crown, very smooth, no problems there. Hand winding, no problems. And going back in, no binding, no problems there. Very nicely done. The serrations on the crown are very capable. Nothing too crazy on here, but very easy to grip, very easy to actuate the crown on that. No problems there. So the case shape on this is pretty standard, pretty classic. As you can tell, it's a vintage-inspired watch. It's got a lot of cues from mid-century design. I'm thinking 1950s to 1960s. Except for the bezel, the case is brushed throughout. And it's a pretty noticeable brushing. It's not something that looks very satin-like. It does look very machine tool-like. It's not an unpleasant look by any means, but it does give the watch a very chunky, toolish feel to it. This does come with a bracelet with solid end links, a 3-link style, oyster style bracelet, brushed throughout, very nice looking, very in keeping with the heavy sort of tool machine-like brushing of the rest of the watch case. You might be able to see this here. The links are screwed in, so this will be very easy to resize, and plenty of micro adjust on this clasp. Let's check out the clasp action. It does have a safety fold over here and nice secure pop to it. It doesn't feel loose. It doesn't feel like it's going to just kind of come open on its own. That's a very good sign. And as for the rest of the clasp, it's got the 2 tabs on the side, very common, and a milled clasp with brushing on the inside. And this also has a very hefty, positive snap to it. It does feel like a tough bracelet. The clasp is signed with the Goodspeed logo there. A little bit smallish, but nicely done. I don't see any problems with that, except that I wish it might have been a little bit larger to be a little bit more proportional to the rest of the clasp. I've mentioned this on some watches before. It does have the male end link. It has the protrusion coming out of the end link there. Some of the watches that you'll see will actually slice in and have this section of the bracelet be articulated. In other words, it'll be able to fold. And what that would end up doing is allow the bracelet to lay a little bit flatter. But the male end actually pushes out the bracelet on either side, and will make this wear a little bit larger if you choose to keep the bracelet on it. Okay, let's go in depth on this dial. As you can see, very vintage inspired, mid-century inspired. The Goodspeed logo you see at the 12 o'clock and the scrawling down at the 6 says Scout Automatic. It's very reminiscent of a mid-century font. I actually really like that. I think it provides a lot of character for this. It definitely echoes the mid-century vibe that this watch is going for. The handset is a sword style handset. You can see that it's angled, catches the light very nicely, and it has those cutouts for the loom. I kind of like the contrast that the hour ring has with the intersection of the watch. It's sort of a brushed silver. It catches the light in a very interesting way, and the matte black around the edge I think goes very nicely with that. I really like the length of the hands on this. The hour stretches out as far as it needs to. The minute hand stretches out as far as it needs to. Everything's touching quite nicely. And one thing that's kind of cool about this, just a little attention to detail, is the red accent on the second hand. The width of that actually, or the length rather I should say, actually corresponds to the width of the hour track. So that's kind of a cool little feature. I do wish that the case diameter was a bit smaller. Look, I know I've got small wrists and I try to be objective with the way that I look at watch dimensions because I know not everybody does have a small wrist. But with the vintage aesthetic of this watch, I think that almost 39 millimeters in case diameter is a little bit much. The lug to lug is just about perfect. I can wear that. You could wear that with a larger wrist. I just think that diameter is a little oversized for the rest of the dimensions of this watch. So let's take a look at the case back here. Goodspeed logo with the globe and Goodspeed scrawling going through it. Scout underneath in that script. A little bit of scrawling around the edge. Interesting feature here, it says waterproof, 200 meters. That's very in keeping with vintage watches. They very commonly came with the claim of being waterproof in the mid-century. In later decades, they were disallowed from putting that on the case because watches are never really waterproof. They're only water resistant. So I think it's no mistake that they chose that. Just sort of a nod to the mid-century look and feel of this watch. Miyota 9039 is the movement that you have, and sapphire crystal, very simple. There is some dead space on the case back here. That is intentional in case the owner of the watch wants to have it engraved, so that's kind of a nice little touch there. Okay, so here's a look at this watch on the wrist. As I've mentioned before, I have a 6-inch wrist. It's a very small wrist. I think this watch is fine on me, so if you have a larger wrist than mine, I think it'll probably look even better. But I think you can kind of see what I mean about the size of this watch when you see it on the wrist. That case diameter, a little too wide as far as I'm concerned. And as far as the bracelet, the male end links, I think you can get a really good idea of how much wider that does make the watch appear. Okay, here's a look on the trusty time grapher. We're sitting at between +6 and +8 seconds a day. Decent amplitude, acceptable beat error, and of course that 28,800 beats per hour, vibrations per hour. Okay, here's a look at the Loom. Little tiny pips for the hour markers there. Nothing to tell you where is the 6 o'clock and where the 12 o'clock is. Not going to be terribly easy to orient yourself in that regard. It's visible. It's probably going to do for most situations. But to be honest, the Loom is a little bit disappointing on this. Okay guys, final thoughts on this particular watch. I love the vintage aesthetic of it. I love the dial design, the font. Wish it was a little bit smaller and more compact, but well in keeping with that mid-century vintage look. So this is a solid choice on the more affordable end of things if you're looking for that kind of an old school aesthetic. And it does have some character to it. I mean, it definitely has design cues from a variety of different vintage watches, but at the same time, it's very much its own thing. It's not a direct homage to anything in particular. So if you want to have something that's unique, I think this fits the bill quite nicely. Okay guys, that's it this time around, and I'll see you again next time for another 10-minute watch review.